When a winter storm trapped a billionaire in a roadside diner, he never expected the quiet waitress who served him coffee would be the woman who destroyed him years ago. Ethan Cole thought he knew power. He thought he understood loss. But on the worst night of the year, stranded miles from anywhere that mattered, he discovered that some debts can't be paid with money, and some secrets refuse to stay buried. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. The roads had turned to glass sometime around 4 in the afternoon. Ethan Cole noticed it first when his driver pumped the brakes going into a curve and the entire back end of the Mercedes drifted sideways like they were floating on air. Marcus, 20 years behind the wheel, never rattled, gripped tight, and said nothing, but Ethan saw his knuckles go white. "We're not making it to Denver," Marcus said finally. His voice was flat, professional, the kind of tone that carried bad news without apology. Ethan didn't answer right away. He was looking out the window at a landscape that had turned hostile in the span of an hour. The mountains that had been postcard perfect that morning were now invisible behind sheets of snow falling so thick the windshield wipers couldn't keep up. The highway, what little he could see of it, was empty. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just white noise and the wind screaming against the side of the car. His phone had lost signal 10 minutes ago. The last email he'd sent, approving a merger that would close before markets opened Monday, was still sitting in his outbox, unsent, like the rest of the world had already moved on without him. "There's a town coming up," Marcus said, squinting at a road sign barely visible through the storm. "Maybe 5 miles. "What town?" "Don't know. Small, but it's something." Ethan checked his watch. 6:15. He was supposed to be walking into a private suite at the Ritz-Carlton right now, ordering room service for himself and his son, making sure the nanny had everything handled back home. Instead, he was stuck in the middle of nowhere with a storm that had turned the Rocky Mountains into a frozen trap. "Fine," he said. "Find us a place to wait it out." Marcus nodded and eased back onto the gas, crawling forward at 20 miles an hour. They weren't the only ones with the same idea. By the time they rolled into the town, a cluster of low buildings huddled against the wind like they were trying not to be noticed. Ethan counted 6 other vehicles already parked in front of a diner with a flickering neon sign that read, "Clara's." The apostrophe was burned out. Marcus pulled in beside a Range Rover that looked like it cost more than the building. Ethan saw movement inside the diner, shapes behind fogged windows, the glow of overhead lights cutting through the storm like a weak lighthouse. "You want me to go in first?" Marcus asked. "I'm not 12, Ethan said, already reaching for the door. The cold hit him like a fist. Not just cold, violent. The kind of wind that didn't care about your coat or your money or the fact that you had a conference call in the morning. It just took what it wanted and kept moving. Ethan shoved the door open and stepped inside. The warmth was immediate, almost offensive after the freeze outside. The diner smelled like old coffee, frying oil, and wet wool. A handful of people sat scattered across the booths, men in expensive jackets, women with diamond earrings, all of them looking annoyed and out of place. Ethan recognized 2 of them immediately. Paul Hendricks, a venture capitalist who'd tried to poach one of Ethan's board members last year. And sitting 3 booths down, Diane Orman, CEO of a logistics company Ethan had considered acquiring before deciding it wasn't worth the headache. Paul looked up, saw Ethan, and gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well," Paul said, "hell of a reunion." Ethan didn't smile back. He scanned the room, taking stock. A counter running the length of the back wall. A kitchen door swinging open and shut. A jukebox in the corner that looked like it hadn't worked since the 90s. And behind the counter, moving between the coffee pot and a tray of mugs, was a woman. She was small. Not fragile, just compact, like she'd learned a long time ago how to take up less space than she needed. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Plain white shirt, black apron, jeans that had seen better years. She didn't look at anyone directly, just kept her head down and worked. "Excuse me," Diane called from her booth, waving a hand like she was hailing a cab. "Can we get some service over here?" The woman, Clara, Ethan assumed based on the sign, looked up briefly, nodded, and grabbed a coffee pot. She moved toward Diane's table without hurry, without fuss, poured the coffee, set down 2 creamers, walked away before Diane could say anything else. Ethan sat down at the counter. Up close, he could see more. The woman was older than he'd first thought. maybe 30, maybe a little past. There were lines at the corners of her eyes that didn't come from smiling. Her hands were quick and efficient, but there was a stiffness in her shoulders, like she was bracing for something. "Coffee?" she asked without looking at him. "Yeah." She poured, set the mug down in front of him, started to turn away. "How long's the storm supposed to last?" Ethan asked. She paused, glanced at him for the first time, and he caught a flash of green eyes that looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "Radio says through the night," she said. "Maybe longer." Her voice was soft, not weak, just quiet, like she'd gotten used to not being heard. "Roads?" "Closed. State Patrol shut down the pass about 20 minutes ago." Ethan absorbed that. "So we're stuck." "Looks like it." She said it without sympathy, without judgment, just a fact. Paul Hendricks appeared at the counter, leaning in like he owned the place. "Hey, sweetheart, you got a manager we can talk to? Because this is kind of a problem. We've got places to be." Claire's expression didn't change. "I'm the manager." Paul blinked. "You?" "Me." "Well," Paul forced a smile. "Okay. So what's the plan here? You got rooms? A hotel nearby?" "No hotel. Nearest one's 30 miles back the way you came." "That's not going to work." "I know." Paul's smile thinned. "So what do we do?" Clara looked at him directly for the first time, and Ethan saw something shift in her posture. Not defensive exactly, just firm. "You wait," she said. "I've got food, coffee, heat, bathrooms. You're welcome to all of it. But the storm doesn't care what you've got planned." Paul opened his mouth, then closed it, walked back to his booth without another word. Ethan almost smiled. Clara turned back to the counter, started wiping it down with a rag that had seen too many shifts. Ethan watched her hands move, steady, methodical, like the work itself was the only thing keeping her upright. "You run this place alone?" he asked. "Most days." "That's a lot." She didn't answer. "I'm Ethan." "I know." That stopped him. "You know?" She glanced at him, and this time there was something in her eyes he couldn't name. Not anger, not interest, just recognition. "You're on the cover of Forbes twice a year," she said quietly. "Kind of hard to miss." Ethan felt something uncomfortable settle in his chest. He'd gotten used to being recognized. It came with the territory. But the way she said it, flat, emotionless, like she was reading a grocery list, made him feel strangely exposed. "Right," he said. She went back to wiping the counter. The door opened again, and two more people stumbled in, another executive type, and a woman in a fur coat that was soaked through. They looked around, saw the booths filling up, and made their way to the counter. Clara moved to greet them, poured more coffee, answered the same questions, gave the same answers. And Ethan sat there watching her work and realized he had no idea what to do with himself. He'd spent the last 15 years building an empire. He knew how to command a room, close a deal, make decisions that moved billions of dollars before breakfast. But here, in this tiny diner in the middle of nowhere, none of that mattered. Here, he was just another stranded traveler with nowhere to go. Marcus came in a few minutes later, shaking snow off his coat. He sat down beside Ethan, ordered coffee, said nothing. That was Marcus. 20 years of driving Ethan to meetings, airports, late-night emergencies, and the man had perfected the art of knowing when to stay quiet. The diner settled into an uneasy rhythm. People drank coffee, checked their phones, complained quietly to each other about missed flights and ruined plans. Clara moved between them all, refilling mugs, bringing out plates of food that nobody had ordered but everyone accepted. Ethan noticed she never charged anyone. Around 8 o'clock, the lights flickered. Everyone looked up. The light steadied, then flickered again. Clara was already moving toward the kitchen. Ethan watched her disappear through the swinging door, heard her rummaging around, and then she came back out with a toolbox and a flashlight. "Power's on a generator," she said to no one in particular. "If it goes out, I'll get it back. Might take a few minutes?" Paul Hendricks laughed, short, humorless. "You're kidding." Clara looked at him. "No. What kind of place doesn't have backup power?" "The kind that's barely staying open," Clara said evenly. "You're welcome to leave if it's not up to your standards." Paul's face went red, but he didn't say anything else. The lights flickered a third time, then held. Clara set the toolbox down behind the counter and went back to work. Ethan found himself watching her more than he should. There was something about the way she moved, like she was carrying the weight of the entire building on her shoulders and refusing to let anyone see it. By 9 o'clock, the storm had gotten worse. The wind was howling now, rattling the windows, making the whole diner shake. Snow was piling up against the glass so fast Ethan couldn't see the parking lot anymore. Diane Ormond stood up, pulling her phone out for the 10th time. "This is insane. I'm calling someone." "No signal," Clara said from behind the counter. "I know that. I'm saying when there is signal." "There won't be," Clara said. "Not until the storm passes." Diane stared at her. "How do you know?" "Because I've lived here my whole life. This is what happens." Diane sat down, muttering something under her breath. Ethan stood up, walked over to the window, pressed his hand against the glass. It was cold enough to sting. Outside, the world had disappeared. Just white. Just wind. Just the sound of something bigger than all of them trying to break in. He thought about his son. 4 years old, safe at home with the nanny, probably already asleep. Ethan had called before they lost signal, told him good night, promised he'd be home soon. That promise felt fragile now. "You okay?" Ethan turned. Clara was standing a few feet away, holding a fresh pot of coffee. "Yeah," he said, "just thinking." She didn't push, just nodded and started to walk away. "Hey," Ethan said. She stopped. "Thank you. For this. For letting us stay." Clara looked at him, and for a second something softened in her expression. Not much, just enough. "You don't have anywhere else to go," she said simply. Then she walked away. By 10 o'clock, people were starting to settle in. The initial panic had faded into exhausted resignation. A few of the executives had claimed booths and were trying to sleep, jackets balled up as pillows. Diane was on her third cup of decaf, staring at her dead phone like she could will it back to life. Ethan stayed at the counter. Clara was in the kitchen now. He could hear her moving around, the clang of pots, the hiss of something frying. A few minutes later, she came out with plates of food. Grilled cheese sandwiches, soup. Nothing fancy, but it smelled good. She set a plate in front of Ethan without asking. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "You haven't eaten," Claire said. "How do you know?" "You've been sitting there for 2 hours drinking coffee. That's not a meal." Ethan looked down at the sandwich. It was cut corner to corner, the bread golden brown, cheese melted perfectly in the middle. It looked like something a mother would make. He picked it up, took a bite. It was the best thing he'd eaten in weeks. Clara watched him for a second, then nodded to herself and moved on to the next person. Ethan ate slowly, listening to the storm rage outside. He thought about the last time he'd been stuck somewhere like this. He couldn't remember. Maybe never. His life didn't allow for delays. If a flight was canceled, he chartered a jet. If a road was closed, he found another. There was always a way around, always a backup plan. But not tonight. Tonight he was just another person in a diner, waiting for the storm to pass. Marcus appeared beside him, setting down his empty mug. "I'm going to try to sleep in the car. You need anything, boss?" "I'm good." Marcus nodded and headed for the door. Ethan watched him go, then turned back to his plate. Claire was wiping down tables now, moving quietly through the space. One of the younger guys, mid-30s, startup founder by the look of him, tried to wave her over, snapping his fingers like she was a dog. Clara ignored him. The guy stood up, walked over to the counter. "Hey, I said I need something." Clara turned, her expression neutral. "What do you need?" "A refill, and maybe a little respect." Clara picked up the coffee pot, filled his mug without a word, and set it down. "That it?" she asked. The guy leaned in, smirking. "You always this cold?" "Only when people snap their fingers at me." The smirk faded. The guy opened his mouth, then thought better of it and walked back to his booth. Ethan hid his smile behind his mug. Clara caught his eye for a second, and he thought he saw the faintest flicker of amusement there, but it was gone before he could be sure. She came back to the counter, started organizing mugs. "You get a lot of that?" Ethan asked. "A lot of what?" "People treating you like you're invisible." Clara paused, her hands stilling for just a moment. Then she went back to stacking mugs. "Every day," she said quietly. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in silence for a while. The storm kept howling, the diner stayed warm, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Ethan realized he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Calm. Not the kind of calm that came from control or power, or having everything lined up exactly the way he wanted it. This was different, smaller, quieter, like he'd stepped off a treadmill he didn't know he was on. Clara glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost 11. "You should try to get some rest," she said. "Gonna be a long night. What about you?" "I'll be fine. When's the last time you slept?" Clara looked at him, and for the first time he saw something guarded in her eyes. Not defensiveness, just privacy. A line she wasn't going to let him cross. "I'm fine," she said again, firmer this time. Ethan let it go. He watched her move back into the kitchen, heard the water running, the sound of dishes being washed. He thought about offering to help, then realized how ridiculous that would sound. Ethan Cole, billionaire, dishwasher. The thought almost made him laugh. Instead, he stood up, left cash on the counter, more than the meal was worth, not enough to matter to him, and walked over to one of the empty booths. He stretched out, using his coat as a blanket, and stared up at the ceiling. The storm wasn't stopping, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole had absolutely no control over what happened next. He closed his eyes. Somewhere in the kitchen, Clara kept working. Mabd. Ethan woke up to the sound of voices. He wasn't sure how long he'd been asleep. Maybe an hour, maybe less. His neck was stiff, his back ached, and the booth was not built for someone his height. He sat up slowly, blinking in the dim light. The diner was quieter now. Most of the others were asleep, sprawled across booths or slumped in chairs. The overhead lights had been dimmed, leaving just the glow from the kitchen and a single lamp by the register. The voices were coming from the counter. Ethan turned his head and saw Clara standing there talking to someone on the phone. Her voice was low, tense, and even from across the room, he could hear the exhaustion in it. "I know, Mom, I know, but I can't leave right now." A pause. "Because there are people here. The storm. Mom, the roads are closed. I can't just..." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll figure it out. I always do." Clara hung up, set the phone down carefully, and pressed both hands flat against the counter. Her head dropped forward, shoulders sagging, and for a moment she just stood there, completely still. Ethan watched from the shadows, feeling like he was seeing something he wasn't supposed to. Then Clara took a breath, straightened up, and went back to work. She didn't know he was watching. Ethan lay back down, staring at the ceiling, and wondered what kind of life left someone that tired. Choke. The hours blurred together after that. Ethan drifted in and out of sleep, waking every time the wind screamed louder or someone shifted in their booth. At some point, he heard the generator kick on, a low rumble that made the whole building vibrate. Clara was out there in the cold, he realized, fixing it, alone. By the time she came back in, her hands were red from the cold and there was snow in her hair. Nobody thanked her. Ethan sat up, watching as she went straight to the coffee pot, poured herself a cup, and stood there for a long moment with her eyes closed, just warming her hands on the mug. He got up, walked over to the counter. Clara opened her eyes, saw him, and straightened. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Not really. You?" "Don't have time." Ethan leaned against the counter. "You run this place by yourself every night?" "Most nights." "That's not sustainable." Clara gave him a look, tired, but not unkind. "I know. So why do it?" She hesitated like she was deciding whether to answer. Then she shrugged. "Because it's mine," she said simply, "and because people need a place to go when everything else closes." Ethan looked around the diner, the worn seats, the cracked tile, the jukebox that didn't work. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and it was open. "How long have you been running it?" he asked. 3 years. My mom started it 20 years ago. I took over when she got sick." "She okay?" Clara's expression flickered. "No, but she's still here." Ethan didn't push. They stood there in silence for a while, just two people awake in a room full of strangers sleeping through a storm. "You have family?" Clara asked quietly. "Besides your driver?" Ethan smiled faintly. "A son. He's 4. What's his name?" "Jonah." "That's a good name." "Yeah, his mom picked it." Clara glanced at him, and he saw the question in her eyes. But she didn't ask. "She's not around anymore," Ethan said, answering it anyway. "She left when he was 6 months old, decided motherhood wasn't for her." Clara's face softened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're better off." "Are you?" The question caught him off guard, not because it was rude, it wasn't, but because it was honest in a way people didn't usually talk to him. "Yeah," Ethan said after a moment. "We are." Clara nodded, like she believed him. The wind rattled the windows again, and they both looked toward the storm. "It's not letting up," Clara said. "No. You're going to be here a while." "Looks like it." Clara set down her mug, started moving toward the kitchen. "I'll make more coffee." "Clara." She stopped, turned. Ethan hesitated, then said, "Thank you. For this. For all of it." She looked at him for a long moment, and he couldn't read her expression. Then she nodded once and disappeared into the kitchen. Ethan stood there alone, listening to the storm, and realized he didn't want to go back to sleep. He wanted to stay right here. By 3 a.m, the diner felt like a ship lost at sea. The storm was relentless now, battering the building with wind and snow that didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept coming. The windows were completely frosted over. The door was blocked by a drift that had piled up 3 feet high, and inside the warmth was starting to feel fragile, like it might give out at any moment. Clara had checked the generator twice more. Ethan had watched her go out both times, bundled in a coat that looked 2 sizes too big, and come back in with snow caked to her boots and her fingers shaking. The 3rd time, he stopped her. "Let me do it," he said. Clara looked up at him, surprised. "You don't know how." "Then show me." She studied him for a second, like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. Then she handed him the flashlight. "Come on." They went out the back door into the freezing dark, and Ethan felt the cold punch straight through his coat. Clara led him to a shed behind the diner, barely visible through the snow, and pulled open the door. Inside, the generator was chugging away, loud and angry. "It's old," Clara said, raising her voice over the noise. "Burns through fuel faster than it should. I have to keep an eye on it or it'll quit." "How much fuel you got?" "Enough for tonight. Maybe tomorrow if we're lucky. And if we're not?" Clara didn't answer. She showed him how to check the levels, how to prime the pump, how to listen for the change in pitch that meant it was about to stall. Ethan watched, memorized, asked questions. Clara answered them all without hesitation, like she'd done this 1,000 times. When they went back inside, Ethan's hands were numb and his face felt like it had been scraped raw. But he felt awake in a way he hadn't in years. Clara poured them both fresh coffee, and they sat at the counter together, not talking, just warming up. Paul Hendricks was awake now, pacing near the window, phone in hand. "Still no signal," he muttered. "This is ridiculous." Nobody responded. Diane was asleep in her booth, snoring softly. The startup guy was scrolling through something on his laptop, screen brightness turned all the way down. Marcus was still in the car, probably frozen solid by now, but too stubborn to come back in. And Clara just kept moving. Ethan watched her wipe down the same table for the 3rd time, and he realized something. She wasn't just working. She was holding the whole place together by sheer will. "You ever take a break?" he asked. Clara glanced at him. "Not really." "Why not?" "Because if I stop, it all falls apart." Ethan set down his mug. "That's not fair." "No," Clara said quietly. "It's not." She said it without bitterness, without self-pity, just fact. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. So he stood up, walked into the kitchen, and started washing dishes. Clara appeared in the doorway a minute later, staring at him like he'd lost his mind. "What are you doing?" "Dishes." "You don't have to—" "I know." Clara opened her mouth, closed it, then she picked up a towel and started drying. They worked side by side in silence, and Ethan realized this was the first time in years he'd done something with his hands that didn't involve a keyboard or a signature. It felt good. When the dishes were done, Clara turned to him, and for the first time that night, she smiled. It was small, tired, but real. "Thank you," she said. Ethan nodded. "Any time." And he meant it. Odd. The storm finally broke just before dawn. The wind died first, fading from a scream to a whisper to nothing. Then the snow stopped, leaving the world silent and buried under feet of white. Ethan stood at the window, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. Behind him, the diner was starting to wake up, people stretching, groaning, checking their phones. Paul Hendricks saw the clear sky and immediately started making calls. Diane was already on her laptop, trying to reschedule meetings. The startup guy looked relieved, like he'd just survived a hostage situation. But Ethan didn't move. He just stood there, looking out at the snow, and realized something had shifted. He didn't want to leave. Clara was behind the counter, brewing a fresh pot of coffee. She looked exhausted, like she'd been running on fumes for the last 12 hours. But she was still standing, still working, still holding it all together. Ethan walked over, sat down. "Roads open yet?" he asked. "Not yet. Plows are working on it. Maybe another hour." "And then everyone leaves." Clara nodded. "And then everyone leaves." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time he saw past the quiet exterior, past the exhaustion, past the walls she'd built around herself. He saw someone who'd been carrying the world alone for too long. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Clara looked up, cautious. "Okay. Why do you do this?" "Really?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, her eyes distant. "Because it's the only thing I have left," she said finally, "and because someone has to." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "That's not enough," he said quietly. Clara met his eyes, and he saw something flicker there, something raw and honest and painful. "I know," she whispered. They sat there in silence as the sun came up, painting the snow outside in shades of gold and pink. And Ethan Cole, who had spent his entire life building walls and making deals and keeping people at arm's length, realized he didn't want to walk away from this. From her. Not yet. The plows arrived an hour later, clearing the roads, opening the pass. One by one, the stranded travelers paid their tabs, thanked Clara in passing, and left. Paul Hendricks didn't even look back. Diane left a 20 on the table and walked out without a word. The startup guy waved awkwardly and disappeared into his Tesla. And then it was just Ethan, Marcus, and Clara. Marcus waited by the door, patient as always. Ethan stood at the counter, looking at Clara, trying to find the right words. "I'll pay for everything," he said. "The food, the coffee, whatever it costs to keep this place open all night." Clara shook her head. "You don't have to." "I want to. I don't need your money." Ethan stopped, looked at her, really looked at her, and he realized she meant it. "Okay," he said quietly. "But if you ever need anything, I won't." It should have felt like a dismissal, but it didn't. It felt like protection. Ethan pulled out a business card, set it on the counter. "Just in case." Clara looked at the card but didn't pick it up. Ethan turned to leave, then stopped. "Thank you, Clara," he said. "For everything." She nodded, didn't smile, didn't say anything, just watched him walk out the door. Marcus was already in the car, engine running. Ethan climbed in, closed the door, and looked back at the diner one last time. Clara was standing in the window, arms crossed, watching them go. And as Marcus pulled onto the highway, heading toward Denver, toward meetings and boardrooms, and the life Ethan had built, he couldn't stop thinking about the woman he was leaving behind. The shy waitress who'd survived a storm without breaking. The woman who'd looked at him like he was just another person. The woman who didn't need him. And for the first time in 15 years, Ethan Cole realized he wanted to be needed. Not for his money, not for his name, just for himself. He pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and saved her number from the card he'd left behind, just in case. The card sat on Clara's counter for 3 days before she threw it away. She told herself it didn't matter, that he was just another rich man passing through, that the storm had been an anomaly, that everything would go back to normal now that the roads were clear and the world had moved on. But normal felt different now. The diner was quieter than usual. The regulars came and went, truck drivers, locals grabbing coffee before work, the occasional tourist who'd missed the turn for the interstate. Clara served them all with the same quiet efficiency she always had, pouring coffee, taking orders, wiping down tables. But her mind kept drifting back to that night, to the way Ethan Cole had looked at her. Not through her the way most people did, but at her. Like he was actually seeing something. She hated that it mattered. On the fourth day, her phone rang. Clara was in the kitchen, elbow deep in dishwater, when she heard it buzzing on the counter. She dried her hands on her apron and walked out, expecting her mother's nurse or the supplier who kept threatening to cut off her account if she didn't pay down her tab. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. Hello? Clara Bennett? The voice was professional, clipped, female. Yeah, who's this? My name is Rachel Kimura. I work for Ethan Cole. He asked me to reach out. Clara's stomach dropped. She gripped the phone tighter, her mind racing. Why? Mr. Cole wanted to follow up regarding the night of the storm. He'd like to ensure you were compensated fairly for your hospitality. Clara closed her eyes. Of course. Money. That's all it ever was with people like him. I don't need his money, she said. I understand, Miss Bennett. However, Mr. Cole was quite insistent. He's prepared to say... I said no. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Miss Bennett, I don't think you understand the amount we're discussing. I don't care about the amount. Another pause, longer this time. May I ask why? Clara looked around the empty diner, the cracked vinyl booths, the flickering light over the register, the stack of unpaid bills shoved in the drawer behind the counter. She could use the money. She knew that. The diner was barely breaking even. Her mother's medical bills were piling up. The roof needed fixing. The freezer was on its last legs. But taking Ethan Cole's money felt like something else. It felt like charity, and Clara had spent too many years refusing to be anyone's charity case. Because I didn't do it for money, Clara said quietly. Tell Mr. Cole thank you, but I'm fine. She hung up before Rachel could respond. Her hand was shaking. Clara set the phone down, pressed her palms flat against the counter, and took a slow breath. It was done. He'd tried. She'd said no. That was the end of it. Except it wasn't. 2 days later, a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the parking lot. Clara saw them through the window and felt her stomach twist. She knew what this was before the first door even opened. She'd seen it on the news enough times, camera crews, reporters, producers looking for a story, and she'd just become one. A man in a suit stepped out of the lead vehicle, followed by a woman with a tablet and a camera operator hauling equipment. Behind them, more people poured out, sound techs, assistants, someone carrying a ring light. Clara's first instinct was to lock the door. Her second was to run. But she didn't either. She just stood there, frozen, as the man in the suit walked up to the door and knocked. Clara opened it. Clara Bennett? The man said, flashing a smile that was too white, too perfect. Yeah. I'm Derek Pullman, ABC News. We'd love to talk to you about the storm, about what happened here that night. Clara's mouth went dry. How did you... One of the executives who was stranded here posted about it on social media. It went viral. Humble waitress saves billionaires during blizzard. It's a great story. Clara felt the ground shift under her feet. I didn't save anyone. That's not what they're saying, Derek gestured to the camera. Look, we just want 5 minutes. Tell your side, let people know who you are. No. Derek blinked. No? I don't want to be on TV. Ms. Bennett, this is a huge opportunity. National exposure. We're talking morning shows, interviews, maybe even... I said no. Clara started to close the door, but Derek put his hand on it, stopping her. With all due respect, he said, his smile thinning, the story is already out there. We can do this with you or without you, but it's happening either way. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. Get off my property, she said. Derek's smile disappeared. He pulled his hand back, straightened his jacket, and nodded to his crew. Your call, he said, but you're making a mistake. They packed up and left, but Clara knew it wasn't over. By that evening, her phone was ringing non-stop. Numbers she didn't recognize, voicemails from reporters, producers, bloggers. Someone had found her email and sent her a message offering $10,000 for an exclusive interview. Clara deleted it. She turned off her phone, locked the doors, and sat alone in the diner as the sun went down. And then she saw the article. It was on her laptop, trending on every news site she checked. The headline was the same everywhere. Waitress opens diner to stranded billionaires during historic storm. There were photos. Someone had taken pictures that night, probably Paul Hendricks or one of the others. Clara in the background, pouring coffee. The snow piled against the windows. A quote from Diane Orman calling her a hero in the truest sense. Clara felt sick. She scrolled down, reading the comments. This woman is an angel. Why isn't she getting more recognition? Someone start a GoFundMe for her. And then buried in the thread, anyone else think it's weird that Ethan Cole was there? What was he doing in the middle of nowhere? Clara closed the laptop. Her hands were shaking again. She didn't want this, any of it. The attention, the scrutiny, the reporters camped outside her diner waiting for a soundbite they could twist into something she didn't mean. But most of all, she didn't want people digging, because if they dug deep enough, they'd find things Clara had spent years trying to bury. The next morning, the convoy came back. This time, there were more of them. 3 news vans, a dozen reporters, cameras everywhere. They set up in the parking lot like they were covering a presidential visit. Clara didn't open the diner. She stayed inside, lights off, curtains drawn, and waited for them to leave. They didn't. By noon, there were people lined up outside, not reporters, customers. People who'd seen the story and wanted to meet her, take photos, buy coffee from the hero waitress. Clara watched from the window, her chest tight, and realized her life was never going to be the same. Her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on that morning, hoping the frenzy had died down. It hadn't. But this message was different. Clara, it's Ethan. I just saw the news. I'm sorry. I didn't know this would happen. Call me if you need anything. Clara stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it. By the 3rd day, the crowd outside had grown. The parking lot was full. People were standing in the road. Someone had started selling T-shirts with Clara's face on them. Clara hadn't left the diner. She'd been sleeping in the back office, surviving on stale crackers and coffee, too afraid to open the door and face what was waiting outside. Her mother's nurse called, frantic. Clara, there are reporters at the house. They're asking about your mom. I don't know what to tell them. Clara closed her eyes, pressing the phone to her ear. Don't tell them anything. Just keep the doors locked. I'll handle it. But she didn't know how. That night, someone knocked on the back door. Clara froze. The knocking came again, softer this time. Clara? It's me. She recognized the voice immediately. Ethan. Clara walked to the door, hesitated, then unlocked it. Ethan stood there in jeans and a jacket, no driver, no entourage. Just him. What are you doing here? Clara asked. I came to apologize. For what? For this. Ethan gestured toward the front of the diner where the glow of camera lights was still visible through the windows. I didn't know they'd turn it into a circus. You couldn't have known. I should have. I know how this works. The second my name got attached to the story, it was over. Clara leaned against the doorframe, exhausted. So, what do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I want to help. I don't need your help. Clara Ikiti. I mean it. I don't need you swooping in like some kind of savior. I've handled worse than this. Ethan looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not pity, not condescension, understanding. Okay, he said quietly, but if you change your mind, I won't. Ethan nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said. I meant what I said that night. Thank you. Clara didn't respond. She just watched him walk back to his car. A rental, she noticed, not the Mercedes, and drive away. When the door closed, Clara locked it and slid down to the floor, her back against the wall, her head in her hands. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. The media frenzy lasted another week. Then, as quickly as it had started, it died. The news vans left. The reporters moved on to the next story. The crowds thinned, then disappeared, and Clara was left alone again. But the damage was done. Her face was everywhere. Her name was searchable. And people had started asking questions, the kind of questions Clara had spent 3 years avoiding. It started small. A comment on a news article. Why is the Bennett working as a waitress? Then another. Isn't her family loaded? What happened? And then the one that made Clara's blood run cold. Clara Bennett. Any relation to the Bennett Group scandal? She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the office, her laptop open, watching the threads multiply. Someone had found an old Society page photo, Clara at a gala, 10 years younger, wearing a designer dress, smiling beside her father. The caption read, Clara Bennett, daughter of real estate mogul Richard Bennett, at the annual Harrington Foundation Gala. The comments underneath were brutal. Wait, this is the humble waitress? She's rich. Her family lost everything in that fraud case. Guess she's not so rich anymore. I heard her fiancé was involved. He took the money and ran. Clara closed the laptop, her hands shaking. She'd known this would happen eventually, that someone would connect the dots, that her past would catch up to her. But she'd hoped she'd have more time. Her phone buzzed, another unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Ms. Bennett, this is Jonathan Voss. I'm an investigative journalist with the Post. I'd like to talk to you about your father. Clara's stomach dropped. No comment. I understand this is difficult, but I said no comment. She hung up, blocked the number, and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen cracked, but still glowing. Clara sat there in the dark, her chest heaving, and realized she couldn't do this alone anymore. She picked up the phone, scrolled through her contacts, and stopped on the one number she'd told herself she'd never use. Ethan. Her finger hovered over the call button. She thought about the night of the storm, the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd washed dishes beside her without being asked, the way he'd left his number just in case. Clara took a breath and pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Clara? I need help, she said quietly. There was a pause. Then, I'm on my way. Ethan arrived 2 hours later. Clara let him in through the back door, and he stepped inside, looking around the dark diner like he was seeing it for the first time. You okay? He asked. No. Ethan set down the bag he'd been carrying. Takeout, she realized, from a place that definitely wasn't local. When's the last time you ate? Clara couldn't remember. Sit, Ethan said, pulling out a chair. She sat. He unpacked the food, Chinese, still hot, and set it in front of her. Clara stared at it, her stomach growling despite everything. Eat, Ethan said. Then we'll talk. Clara picked up the chopsticks and ate slowly, mechanically. The food was good, but she barely tasted it. Ethan sat across from her, waiting. When she finally set down the chopsticks, he leaned forward. Tell me what happened. And Clara did. She told him about her father, about the Bennett Group, the real estate empire her family had built over 3 generations, about the deals that had gone bad, the investors who'd lost everything, the fraud investigation that had torn their world apart. She told him about her fiancé, Michael, charming and ambitious, the man her father had trusted with everything, the man who'd stolen millions and disappeared the night the FBI came knocking. She told him about the trial, the media circus, the guilty verdict that sent her father to prison for 10 years for crimes he'd only been partially responsible for. And she told him about the aftermath. The estate seized, the accounts frozen, her mother's breakdown, the friends who stopped calling, the life that had evaporated overnight. I changed my name, Clara said quietly. Moved here. Started over. And the diner? My mom's sister owned it. She left it to us when she died. It was the only thing the government couldn't take. Ethan was quiet for a long time. And now people are digging, he said. Yeah. How long do you think before they put it together? A week? Maybe less. Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tight. I can stop it, he said. Clara looked up, surprised. How? I have lawyers, good ones. They can shut down the stories, threaten defamation suits, make it more trouble than it's worth. That won't make it go away. No, but it'll buy you time. Clara shook her head. I don't want to bury it. I'm tired of hiding. Then what do you want? Clara met his eyes, and for the first time in years she said the truth out loud. I want my life back. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. Then let me help you. Clara looked down at their hands, his larger, calloused in places she wouldn't have expected, warm against her cold fingers. Why? She asked. Why do you care? Ethan hesitated, like he was choosing his words carefully. Because you didn't deserve what happened to you, he said finally, and because I know what it's like to lose everything and have to build it back alone. Clara wanted to pull her hand away, but she didn't. There's something else, Ethan said, his voice quieter now. Clara looked up. The deal that destroyed your father's company, the investors who pulled out at the last minute, the financing that fell through, Clara felt her chest tighten. What about it? Ethan's jaw clenched. I was one of them. The words hung in the air between them. Clara pulled her hand back slowly, her mind racing. What? I didn't know, Ethan said quickly. I didn't know your father, didn't know the details. My firm handled it. They told me the company was over-leveraged, that it was a bad investment. I signed off on the withdrawal. Clara stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. You destroyed my family. I didn't. You pulled the funding. You and people like you. You left us with nothing. Clara, get out. Ethan stood, his hands raised. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You're just like the rest of them. You take what you want and leave everyone else to clean up the mess. That's not fair. Fair? Clara's voice broke. You want to talk about fair? She was shaking now, years of anger and grief and exhaustion pouring out all at once. I lost everything because of people like you. My father's in prison. My mother can barely remember my name. I've spent 3 years scraping by in this diner, watching everything I worked for disappear. And you... She stopped, her throat closing. Ethan took a step toward her. Don't, Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan stopped. They stood there in the dark diner, the silence heavy between them. I'm sorry, Ethan said finally. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. Clara wiped her eyes, angry at herself for crying. Just go. Ethan didn't move. I meant what I said. I want to help. I don't want your help. You called me. Clara flinched, because he was right. She had called him, and she hated that she had. Ethan picked up his jacket, started toward the door, then stopped. The investigator, he said. The one digging into your past. His name's Voss, right? Clara nodded. I'll take care of it. I told you. I know what you told me, but I'm doing it anyway. He walked out the back door and disappeared into the night. Clara stood there alone, her hands balled into fists, her chest heaving, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself cry. The next morning, the calls stopped. Clara's phone was silent. No reporters, no producers, no bloggers offering money for her story. It was like someone had flipped a switch. She didn't have to wonder who. That afternoon, a package arrived. Clara found it on the back step, unmarked except for her name written in neat handwriting on the front. She brought it inside, opened it carefully. Inside was a folder, and inside the folder were documents, financial records, email chains, phone transcripts, all of it pointing to one name, Michael Torrance, her ex-fiancé. Clara's hands shook as she read through the pages. Ethan's team had done in days what the FBI hadn't managed in years. They'd tracked Michael down, found the money he'd stolen, proven that her father had been set up. At the bottom of the folder was a note, handwritten. This doesn't undo what I did, but maybe it's a start. Clara sat down at the counter, the documents spread out in front of her, and realized Ethan Cole had just handed her the key to everything she'd lost. And she had no idea what to do with it. Clara read the documents 3 times before she believed what she was seeing. Michael Torrance hadn't just stolen money. He'd systematically dismantled her father's company from the inside, rerouted funds through shell corporations, falsified reports to make the Bennett Group look insolvent when it wasn't. And then he'd walked away clean while her father took the fall. The evidence was all here. Bank transfers, forged signatures, email chains where Michael coordinated with outside investors to pull their funding at precisely the right moment to trigger collapse. One of those investors had been Ethan's firm. Clara's phone rang. She knew who it was before she looked. Did you read it? Ethan asked. Yeah. And? Clara stared at the papers spread across her kitchen table, her coffee going cold beside them. Where did you find him? Cayman Islands, living under a different name. He's been there for 3 years. 3 years. The same amount of time Clara had been serving coffee and scraping by, Michael had been sitting on a beach spending money he'd stolen from people who'd trusted him. What do you want to do? Ethan asked. Clara closed her eyes. What did she want to do? She'd spent so long just surviving that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have options. I need to talk to my father, she said finally. I can arrange that. Ethan, I know you don't want my help, but let me do this anyway. Clara should have said no, should have hung up and figured it out herself like she'd figured out everything else. but she was tired. So tired. "Okay," she whispered. 2 days later, Clara sat in the visiting room of a federal prison 3 hours north of the diner, waiting for them to bring her father out. She hadn't seen him in 2 years. The last time had been right after her mother's first stroke, when Clara had driven up to tell him in person. He'd looked broken then, older than his 60 years, the fight gone out of him. She wondered if he'd look worse now. The door buzzed. A guard led Richard Bennett into the room, and Clara's breath caught. He looked smaller, thinner, gray hair cut short, prison blues hanging off a frame that used to fill out custom suits. But when he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made Clara's chest ache. "Clara Bear," he said, his voice rough. She hadn't heard that nickname in a decade. They sat across from each other, a scarred table between them. Richard reached for her hand and Clara let him take it, even though touching still felt complicated. "How's your mother?" he asked. "Same. The nurse says she's stable." "That's good. That's good." Silence stretched between them. There was too much to say and no safe place to start. "I got your message," Richard said, "about the documents. I don't understand. Where did they come from?" Clara pulled the folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Richard opened it with shaking hands. She watched his face as he read, watched the confusion turn to recognition, then to something that looked like grief. "He really did it," Richard said quietly. "I knew. Part of me always knew. But seeing it like this, Dad, this proves you were set up. This could get you out." Richard looked up at her, and Clara saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. "Clara, if we bring this forward, it's going to open everything back up. The trial, the media, all of it. Are you ready for that?" "Are you?" Richard set the papers down carefully, his hand still shaking. "I've made my peace with being here. I have 3 years left. I can do 3 years. But you shouldn't have to. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean fighting is the right choice." Clara felt anger flare in her chest. "So what? We just let him win? Let him keep the money and the life he stole while you rot in here?" "Watch your tone." The correction was automatic, instinctive, the same voice he'd used when she was 16 and talked back at dinner parties. Clara almost laughed. "I'm not 16 anymore, Dad. You don't get to tell me what to do." "No, but I can tell you what I've learned in here. Sometimes the cost of being right is higher than the cost of being wrong. That's giving up. That's surviving." Clara pulled her hand back. "I didn't drive 3 hours to hear you tell me to let it go." "Then why did you come?" "Because I thought you'd want to fight. I thought you'd want your name back." Richard leaned back in his chair, and for a moment he looked every bit the man who used to command boardrooms and close billion-dollar deals. "My name doesn't matter anymore," he said. "Yours does. And if you drag this back into the light, everyone's going to remember you're Richard Bennett's daughter. Is that what you want?" Claire didn't have an answer for that. Richard softened. "How's the diner?" "Struggling." "You need money?" "No." Claire, I don't need money, Dad. I need you to stop acting like you're already dead." The words came out harder than she meant them to, and she saw Richard flinch. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know I failed you, failed your mother, failed everyone who trusted me. But I can't undo that. All I can do is make sure you don't go down with me. I already went down. I've been down for 3 years. Then don't go down again." The guard called time. 5 minutes left. Richard stood slowly, like his bones hurt. "Whoever gave you those documents, they did it for a reason. Make sure it's a reason you can live with." Clara stood too. "What if I want to fight?" "Then you fight. But don't do it for me. Do it for you." He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "I'm proud of you, Clara Bear. I know I don't say it enough, but I am." Then he was gone. Clara sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before she could make herself drive. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "How did it go?" Clara stared at the message. She could tell him it went fine, thank him for his help, and go back to her quiet life in the diner. Let Michael keep the money. Let her father serve his time. Let everything stay buried, or she could do what she'd been too afraid to do for 3 years. She could fight. Clara started the car and drove to Denver. Ethan's office was downtown, 40th floor of a glass tower that probably cost more than Clara's entire childhood home. She'd never been inside a building like this, not since before everything fell apart. The lobby alone made her feel small, with its marble floors and modern art and security guards who looked at her like she didn't belong. Maybe she didn't, but she was here anyway. The receptionist called up, and 5 minutes later Ethan appeared, stepping out of a private elevator in a suit that fit him the way suits fit men with money. He looked surprised to see her. "Clara, I didn't know you were coming." "I didn't either." Ethan glanced at the receptionist, then back at Clara. "Come on up." They rode the elevator in silence. Clara watched the numbers climb and tried not to think about how high they were going. Ethan's office was corner, windows on two sides, views that stretched all the way to the mountains. The furniture was minimalist, expensive. Everything was clean, organized, controlled. It felt nothing like the diner. "Sit," Ethan said, gesturing to a leather chair. Clara sat. Ethan sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "How's your father?" "Resigned." "To what?" "To losing." Ethan nodded slowly. "And you?" Clara met his eyes. "I'm not." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Good. I want to go after Michael. I want to get the money back, clear my father's name, and make sure that bastard pays for what he did. That's going to take time. Lawyers. Resources." "I know. It's going to get ugly. The media will dig everything back up. Your life won't be private anymore." "It's already not private." Ethan stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city below. "There's something you should know," he said without turning around. "About the deal that pulled funding from your father's company." Clara's stomach tightened. "Okay." "I looked into it, went back through the records, the reports my team gave me before I signed off." "And?" Ethan turned to face her. "They were falsified. The financials that made the Bennett Group look insolvent, Michael fed them to my analysts. He wanted outside investors to pull out. He needed the company to look like it was failing so he could strip it clean." Clara felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "You're saying you were part of his plan." "I'm saying he used me, used my firm, and I didn't ask enough questions to catch it. So it's your fault." Ethan didn't flinch. "Yeah, it is." Clara stood up, her hands balled into fists. "You could have stopped it. If you'd done your job, if you'd actually looked at what you were signing." "I know. My father would be free. My mother wouldn't have had a stroke. I wouldn't have spent 3 years hiding in a diner pretending to be someone else." "I know, Clara." "Do you?" Her voice broke. "Do you have any idea what it's like to lose everything because people like you couldn't be bothered to check your own paperwork?" Ethan crossed the space between them, and Clara saw something raw in his eyes. "You want me to say I'm sorry again?" "I will. You want me to write you a check to make up for it? Done. But none of that changes what happened, and none of it fixes what you're feeling right now." "Then what does?" "Making him pay." Clara stared at him, her chest heaving. "I can give you the best lawyers in the country," Ethan said. "I can fund the entire case. I can use every resource I have to track down every dollar Michael stole and make sure he never sees daylight again." "Why? Because you feel guilty?" "Yes." The honesty surprised her. "And because you deserve justice," Ethan continued. "And because watching you fight through that storm, watching you hold that diner together when everyone else was falling apart, it made me realize I've spent 15 years building an empire, and I've never once done something that actually mattered." Clara didn't know what to say to that. "Let me help you," Ethan said quietly. "Not because you need it, but because I do." Clara looked at him for a long moment, saw the cracks in his armor, the guilt he was carrying, the way he was holding himself together by sheer will. He wasn't so different from her. "Okay," she said finally. Ethan let out a breath. "Okay. But I have conditions." "Name them." "I want to be involved in everything, every decision, every move. This is my fight, not yours." "Agreed." "And I don't want your money." Ethan frowned. "Clara, I mean it. You can give me lawyers, resources, whatever, but I'm not taking cash. I'm not your charity case." "It's not charity." "Then what is it?" Ethan hesitated. "A partnership." Clara considered that. "Fine. Partners." She held out her hand. Ethan took it. They shook, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The legal team Ethan assembled was terrifying. 5 lawyers, all specialists, all aggressive. They sat around a conference table in Ethan's office and laid out a strategy that made Clara's head spin. We file criminal charges against Michael Torrance for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, the lead attorney said. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she had the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Simultaneously, we file a civil suit to recover the stolen assets. How long will that take? Clara asked. 6 months if we're lucky. A year if Michael fights it. He'll fight it, Clara said. Patricia nodded. Probably. But we have the evidence. Bank records, email trails, testimony from former employees who suspected him. It's a strong case. What about my father's conviction? That's trickier. We'd need to file an appeal, prove he was coerced or framed. The new evidence helps, but overturning a federal conviction isn't easy. Clara felt her hope deflate. But it's possible, Patricia added, especially if we can get Michael to testify. He won't. He will if we offer him a deal. Clara's jaw tightened. No deals. Clara, I said no deals. He doesn't get to walk away from this. Patricia glanced at Ethan, who nodded. Then we do it the hard way. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Clara's head was pounding and she felt like she'd been run over. Ethan walked her to the elevator. You okay? He asked. I don't know. This is going to get harder before it gets easier. I know. The elevator doors opened. Clara stepped inside, then turned back. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you. He nodded. Don't thank me yet. The doors closed. Clara rode down 40 floors and walked out into the Denver afternoon. The air was cold, sharp, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. The story broke 2 weeks later. Clara was at the diner when her phone started ringing. She ignored it at first, but then the news vans showed up again, and she knew. Someone had leaked the lawsuit. By evening, it was everywhere. Billionaire helps clear wrongly convicted father. Former heiress fights back against ex-fiancé. Ethan Cole's secret connection to Bennett Group scandal. The cameras were back, the reporters were back, and this time they weren't leaving. Clara locked herself in the office and called Ethan. I'm sorry, he said immediately. We don't know who leaked it. Does it matter? No, but we're handling it. Patricia's team is putting out a statement, and I've got my PR people shutting down the worst of it. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. You can't shut this down, Ethan. This is who I am now. The girl who used to have everything and lost it. The waitress who got rescued by a billionaire. That's the story they want. Then we give them a different story. How? You tell the truth. Clara went quiet. Do an interview, Ethan said. One interview, your terms, your story. Control the narrative before someone else does. I don't want to be on camera. I know, but you're already on camera. At least this way you get to decide what they hear. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in. I'll think about it, she said, and hung up. But she didn't have to think long. The next morning, someone published an old photo of Clara and Michael together. They were at a benefit, dressed in formal wear, smiling. The headline read, Did she know? Clara stared at the article, her hands shaking. They were questioning whether she'd been involved in the fraud, whether she'd helped Michael steal the money and played victim when it all fell apart. She called Ethan back. Set up the interview. Patricia arranged it with a journalist named Lauren Michaels, someone with a reputation for fairness. They'd do it at the diner, Clara's territory, and it would air as a primetime special. Clara had 4 days to prepare. Ethan showed up the night before with takeout and a bottle of wine. You don't have to do this, he said as they sat at the counter, the diner empty and dark around them. Yeah, I do. You could walk away. Let the lawyers handle it. Stay out of the spotlight. Clara picked at her food, not hungry. I've been hiding for 3 years. I'm done. Ethan poured her wine. She took a sip, let it warm her from the inside. What was he like? Ethan asked. Michael. Clara hadn't talked about Michael in a long time, hadn't let herself think about him beyond the anger and betrayal. Charming, she said finally. Smart. He knew exactly what to say to make you feel like the most important person in the room. You loved him. I thought I did. What changed? Clara looked at Ethan. I found out who he really was. They sat in silence for a while, drinking wine, not talking. It should have been uncomfortable, but it wasn't. You know what the worst part was? Clara said quietly. What? I introduced him to my father. I vouched for him. Told my dad he was brilliant, trustworthy, someone we could build the future with. And my dad believed me. That's not your fault. Isn't it? Ethan reached across the counter and took her hand. Michael made his choices. You made yours. They're not the same thing. Clara wanted to believe that. What about you? She asked. You ever been married? Once, briefly. What happened? She wanted the life, not the person. When she realized I came with a kid and actual responsibilities, she left. That's awful. Yeah. Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. But Jonah's better off without her. How is he? Your son? Ethan's face softened the way it always did when someone asked about Jonah. He's good. Asking about you, actually. Clara blinked. Me? I told him about the storm, about the nice lady who gave us food and a warm place to stay. He wants to meet you. Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest. I'd like that, she said. Ethan squeezed her hand. Me too. The interview was set for 2 in the afternoon. Clara spent the morning cleaning the diner, straightening tables, polishing the counter. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. Lauren Michaels arrived early with a small crew. She was younger than Clara expected, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes and a calm presence. Thank you for doing this, Lauren said as they set up cameras and lighting. Clara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. They sat across from each other in a booth, 2 cameras pointed at Clara's face. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like everyone could see straight through her. Ready? Lauren asked. No. Yeah. The cameras started rolling. Lauren asked the easy questions first. About the diner, about the storm, about what it was like serving coffee to some of the wealthiest people in the country. Clara answered carefully, keeping her voice steady. Then Lauren shifted. Let's talk about your family, about the Bennett group and what happened. Clara took a breath and told the truth. She talked about growing up in a world of privilege, about learning the business from her father, about believing she'd spend her life building something that mattered. She talked about Michael, about falling in love, about trusting him, about the engagement ring that had felt like a promise. She talked about the night everything fell apart, the FBI agents at the door, her father in handcuffs, her mother collapsing in the hallway. And she talked about the 3 years after, the quiet, invisible years where she'd learned how to be no one. Do you blame your father? Lauren asked. Clara looked directly into the camera. I blame the man who stole from him, who lied to him, who used my family's trust to build his own fortune while we lost everything. Michael Torrance. Yes. And now you're suing him. Yes. Why now? Why not 3 years ago? Clara paused. This was the question she'd been dreading. Because 3 years ago, I didn't have proof. And I didn't have help. You mean Ethan Cole? I mean someone who believed me when everyone else had moved on. Lauren leaned forward. There are people saying you and Mr. Cole are romantically involved, that this is more than a business relationship. Clara felt her face flush. That's not true. But he's helping you, funding your legal team. Why would he do that if not for personal reasons? Because he's a good person, and because he wants to make things right. Make what right? Clara hesitated. She could protect Ethan, keep his involvement in the original deal quiet, or she could tell the whole truth. Ethan's firm was one of the investors who pulled funding for my father's company, Clara said. He didn't know he was being fed false information, but he signed off on it anyway. Lauren's eyes widened. So he's partially responsible for what happened to you. He made a mistake, and now he's trying to fix it. Is that enough? A mistake that destroyed your family? Clara felt anger rise in her chest. Nothing can undo what happened, but at least he's trying. That's more than anyone else did. The interview went on for another hour. By the time they wrapped, Clara felt wrung out, exhausted, like she'd run a marathon. Lauren shook her hand. You did great. This is going to make an impact. Clara hoped she was right. Ethan was waiting outside when the crew left. How did it go? He asked. I don't know. I told them about your firm, about the investment. Ethan went still. Okay. You're not mad? No, it's the truth. They stood in the parking lot as the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. What happens now? Clara asked. Now we wait. The interview airs next week, and then we see how Michael responds. Clara nodded. Ethan reached for her hand. Whatever happens, we're in this together. Clara looked down at their joined hands and realized she believed him. The interview aired on a Tuesday night. Clara watched it alone in her apartment above the diner, her heart pounding. Seeing herself on screen was surreal, uncomfortable. She looked tired, older than 30. But she also looked strong, like someone who'd survived. Her phone started ringing before the interview even finished, friends she hadn't heard from in years, reporters wanting follow-ups, strangers offering support. And then, just before midnight, a message from an unknown number. You shouldn't have done that. Clara stared at the screen, her blood running cold. Another message came through. You have no idea what you've started. She knew that number. Had deleted it 3 years ago, but still remembered every digit. Michael. Clara's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She screenshot the messages, her heart hammering against her ribs, then called Ethan. He picked up on the first ring. He contacted me, she said, her voice barely steady. Michael? Yeah. What did he say? Clara read him the messages. There was silence on the other end, the kind that felt dangerous. I'm coming over, Ethan said. You don't have to. I'm already in the car. He hung up. Clara sat on her couch, staring at her phone, watching for more messages. None came, but the silence felt worse than the threats. Michael knew where she was, had probably known the whole time. She thought about the last time she'd seen him, the morning after the FBI raid, when she'd confronted him in his apartment. He'd looked her straight in the eye and told her he loved her, that they'd get through this together. 3 hours later, he was gone. Every account emptied, every trace of him erased except for the mess he'd left behind. And now he was back. Ethan arrived 20 minutes later. Clara let him in through the back entrance, not wanting anyone to see. He looked like he'd been sleeping when she called. Jeans, a wrinkled shirt, hair uncombed. Let me see the phone, he said. Clara handed it over. Ethan read the messages, his jaw working. We're going to the police. And tell them what? That my ex-fiancé sent me vaguely threatening texts? It's not vague, Clara. He's trying to intimidate you. He's always been good at that. Ethan looked up from the phone. Did he hurt you? Before? Clara hesitated. Not because the answer was complicated, but because she hadn't let herself think about it in so long. Not physically, she said quietly. But he knew how to make me feel small, how to twist things so I was always the one apologizing, always the one who was wrong. Ethan's expression darkened. I'm calling Patricia, and then I'm calling security. Security? Someone's going to be watching the diner and your apartment 24/7 until this is over. That's excessive. No, it's not. Ethan handed her phone back. Michael's desperate. The interview put pressure on him. He's going to make mistakes now, but that also makes him dangerous. Clara wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because Ethan was right. She'd seen Michael desperate once before, the night everything collapsed, and desperation made him capable of things she'd never imagined. Ethan made the calls while Clara sat on the couch, trying not to think about how her apartment suddenly felt too small, too exposed. By morning, there was a man in an SUV parked across the street and another one in the diner's parking lot. Clara hated it, but she didn't ask them to leave. The lawsuit moved faster than Clara expected. Within 2 weeks, Patricia's team had filed charges and frozen several of Michael's offshore accounts. He tried to move the money when the interview aired, but Ethan's people had been watching, and they'd gotten a court order just in time. Michael hired lawyers, expensive ones. Good, Patricia said when she heard. Let him burn through his stolen money paying legal fees. They were sitting in Ethan's conference room, surrounded by boxes of documents. Clara had spent the last 3 days combing through financial records, highlighting transactions, helping the team build their case. It felt good to have something to do, something concrete. We've got him on fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy, Patricia said, tapping a folder. The evidence is solid, but getting him extradited from the Caymans is going to be the hard part. How hard? Clara asked. Depends on how much he fights it. Could be months, could be longer. Clara's stomach sank. She'd known this wouldn't be quick, but months felt impossibly long. What about my father's case? She asked. Patricia exchanged a look with Ethan. We filed the appeal, she said carefully, but the judge hasn't ruled yet. It could go either way. What are the odds? Honestly, 60-40 in our favor. Maybe less. Clara felt the air go out of the room. That's it? After everything we found? The original conviction was based on evidence that looked legitimate at the time. We're asking the court to admit that evidence was fabricated, which means admitting they got it wrong. Judges don't like doing that. So my father could stay in prison even though we can prove he was framed. It's possible. Clara stood up, walked to the window. Down below, Denver moved through its day. People rushing to meetings and lunches and lives that hadn't been blown apart. She felt Ethan's presence behind her before he spoke. We're not giving up, he said quietly. I know. I mean it, Clara. Whatever it takes. She turned to look at him. Why are you doing this? Really? Ethan hesitated, like he was choosing his words carefully. Because I spent 15 years making money and building companies, and I never once asked if I was making things better or just making things. And then I met you, and I realized I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. Clara didn't know what to say to that. You make me want to be better, Ethan said, and I don't know what to do with that except try. Before Clara could respond, Patricia's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression changed. When? She asked. And you're sure? She hung up and looked at them both. Michael's agreed to a meeting. Clara's heart stopped. What? His lawyers reached out. He wants to talk. Off the record. Just you and him. Absolutely not, Ethan said immediately. It could be a trap, Patricia agreed, but it could also be an opening. If he's willing to talk, he might be willing to deal. I thought we weren't making deals, Clara said. We're not, but we can listen to what he has to say. Clara looked at Ethan. His face was set, his jaw tight. I don't like this, he said. Neither do I, Clara admitted, but I need to hear what he has to say. Then I'm coming with you. No. Clara, he won't talk if you're there. This has to be just me. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but Patricia cut in. She's right. Michael specified Clara only. We can have security nearby, but if she walks in with an entourage, he'll shut down. Ethan turned to Clara. You don't have to do this. Yeah, Clara said quietly. I do. They set up the meeting for neutral ground, a hotel conference room in downtown Denver. Patricia arranged for security in the lobby and a wire on Clara, hidden under her jacket. The night before, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to prepare herself for seeing Michael again. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times over the past 3 years. What she'd say, how she'd react. But now that it was real, she had no idea. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. You okay? Clara smiled despite herself. It was 2 a.m, and he was checking on her. Can't sleep. The phone rang a second later. Hi, Ethan said when she answered. Hi. Talk to me. About what? Anything. Take your mind off tomorrow. So Clara did. She told him about the diner, about the regulars who came in every morning and ordered the same thing, about the trucker who left a $100 tip once because his daughter had been sick and Clara had let him use the phone to call her, about the couple who'd had their first date at the counter 20 years ago and still came in every anniversary. Ethan listened, asked questions, laughed at the right parts. You love it, he said finally. The diner. Clara thought about that. Yeah, I do. Why? Because it's mine, and because it's the one thing Michael couldn't touch. You're going to be okay tomorrow, Ethan said. You know that, right? I don't know anything anymore. Then trust me. You're stronger than he ever was, and he's going to see that. Clara felt something warm settle in her chest. Thank you. For what? For staying on the phone with me at 2 in the morning. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Any time, Clara. I mean that. They stayed on the phone until Clara finally felt her eyes getting heavy. She fell asleep with Ethan's voice in her ear, talking about his son, about the toddler who insisted on wearing a cape to preschool and called himself Super Jonah. It was the best sleep she'd had in weeks. The meeting was set for 10 o'clock. Clara arrived 15 minutes early, wearing jeans and a plain shirt because she refused to dress up for Michael. The security team ran through the plan one more time. They'd be right outside. The wire would capture everything. And if anything went wrong, she just had to say the word coffee, and they'd be in the room in seconds. Patricia squeezed her shoulder. You've got this. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened and Michael Torrance walked in. He looked good. That was the first thing Clara noticed and hated herself for noticing. 3 years on a beach had been kind to him. Tanned, fit, expensively dressed. His hair was different, shorter, but the smile was the same. The one that used to make her feel like the only person in the world. Now, it just made her angry. Clara, Michael said, like they were old friends running into each other at a coffee shop. You look good. Don't. Don't what? Don't pretend this is casual. Don't act like you didn't destroy my life and disappear. Michael's smile faded slightly. He sat down across from her, folded his hands on the table. Fair enough, he said. You want to get straight to it? That's why I'm here. Okay. Michael leaned back in his chair. I want you to drop the lawsuit. Clara almost laughed. You're joking. I'm not. Drop the lawsuit, call off your attack dogs, and I'll make it worth your while. Worth my while. I'll give you $2 million. Cash. Untraceable. You can rebuild the diner, take care of your mother, start over somewhere nice. Clara stared at him, genuinely stunned. You think you can buy me off? I think everyone has a price, and yours is probably lower than you'd like to admit. The condescension in his voice made Clara's blood boil. The answer is no. Clara, you stole from my family. You let my father go to prison for your crimes. And now you think you can throw money at me and make it go away? Michael's expression hardened. Your father was weak. He signed off on deals he didn't understand, trusted the wrong people, let me do whatever I wanted because he was too busy playing golf and schmoozing investors. He trusted you. He was a fool. Clara's hands clenched into fists under the table. And me? What was I? Michael looked at her, and for a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. You were supposed to come with me, he said quietly. That was the plan. We'd disappear together, live on a beach somewhere, leave all of this behind. I would never have gone with you. You sure about that? You loved me, Clara. Don't pretend you didn't. I loved who I thought you were. I didn't know the real you. The real me is the same person who took you to Italy for your birthday, who proposed on that rooftop in Manhattan, who told you every secret I had. Except the one that mattered. Michael smiled, but it was sad now. Yeah. Except that one. They sat in silence for a moment. Why did you do it? Clara asked. You didn't need the money. Your family had plenty. My family cut me off when I was 25, said I was reckless, irresponsible. They wanted me to earn my own way. Michael's jaw tightened. So I did. And then I earned more. And I realized I was better at it than any of them had ever been. So this was about proving something to your family. This was about taking what I deserved, what your father never appreciated. He had an empire handed to him, and he was running it into the ground with bad decisions and outdated thinking. I saved that company before I dismantled it. You destroyed it. I liberated the capital, put it to better use. Clara felt sick. You actually believe that? Michael leaned forward. Look, I didn't come here to debate ethics with you. I came here to offer you a way out. Take the money, Clara. Walk away. Let your father serve his time and move on with your life. He's innocent. He's complicit. There's a difference. Not to me. Michael sighed like she was a child refusing to see reason. Then you're going to lose. My lawyers are better than yours. I've got resources you can't match. And even if you somehow win, it'll take years. Your father will be an old man by the time he gets out. If he gets out at all. At least I'll know I tried. Stubborn, Michael said, almost fondly. That's what I always loved about you. And what drove me crazy. I'm not dropping the lawsuit, Michael. Then you're making a mistake. Probably, but it's mine to make. Michael stood up slowly. Last chance, Clara. 2 million. Final offer. Go to hell. He smiled, and this time it was the smile she remembered from the night he left. Cold, calculating. See you in court, he said. Then he walked out. Clara sat there for a long moment, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. The door opened and Patricia rushed in, followed by Ethan. We got it all, Patricia said, holding up the recording device. Every word. But Ethan was looking at Clara. You okay? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. You did great, Ethan said, sitting down beside her. You didn't give him anything. He offered me $2 million to walk away. And you said no. Yeah. Why? Clara looked at him. Because some things aren't for sale. Ethan reached for her hand and squeezed it. I'm proud of you. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. I need air. She walked out of the conference room, past the security guards, out into the Denver morning. The sun was too bright, the air too thin. She leaned against the building and tried to breathe. Ethan followed her out. He's scared, Clara said. What? Michael, he's scared. That's why he wanted to meet. That's why he offered money. He knows we have him. Yeah, Ethan said. We do. Clara turned to face him. What if we lose anyway? We won't. But what if we do? What if everything we've done, everything we've found, isn't enough? Ethan stepped closer. Then we keep fighting. But Clara, you need to hear this. You've already won. How? My father's still in prison, Michael's still free. But you're not hiding anymore. You're not letting him control your story. That matters. Clara wanted to believe him. Come on, Ethan said, offering his hand. Let's get out of here. They drove back to the diner in silence. When they pulled into the parking lot, Clara saw someone sitting on the front step. A woman. Mid-50s, well-dressed, crying. Clara got out of the car slowly, her heart pounding. The woman looked up, and Clara's breath caught. It was Michael's mother. Eleanor Torrance stood up, wiping her eyes. Clara, I'm so sorry to ambush you like this, but I needed to see you. Clara stopped a few feet away. Why? Because I saw the interview, and I believe you. Ethan stepped up beside Clara, protective. Mrs. Torrance, I know what my son did, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. I've known for a while, and I've been too much of a coward to do anything about it. Clara felt the ground shift under her feet. You knew? Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. He called me 6 months after he disappeared, told me he was safe, that he'd done what he had to do. I asked him about the money, and he laughed, said it was rightfully his. And you didn't go to the police. He's my son. Eleanor's voice cracked. I know that's not an excuse. I know I should have, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. Clara felt anger rise in her chest, but it was tangled with something else. Pity, maybe. Why are you here? She asked. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. This has everything. Emails between Michael and me, bank statements he sent showing where he moved the money, recordings of our phone calls, all of it. She held it out to Clara with a shaking hand. I can't make up for what he did, or for what I didn't do, but I can help you now. Clara took the flash drive slowly, like it might burn her. Why now? She asked. Because I watched your interview, and I saw what my son took from you, and I realized I've been protecting a monster. Eleanor wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. Use it, all of it. Make him pay for what he did. Then she turned and walked to her car, got in, and drove away. Clara stood there holding the flash drive, her mind reeling. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. This changes everything. Yeah, Clara whispered. It does. They gave the flash drive to Patricia that afternoon. She called an hour later, her voice electric with excitement. This is it. This is the smoking gun. We've got communication showing premeditation, money trails we couldn't find before, everything we needed to prove Michael planned this from the beginning. What about my father? Clara asked. With this, I'd say our odds of appeal just went up to 90%, maybe higher. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. Really? Really, Clara, you did it. You got him. After she hung up, Clara sat on the couch in her apartment and cried. Not sad tears, relief, exhaustion. 3 years of carrying weight she'd thought would never lift. Ethan sat beside her, not saying anything, just being there. When Clara finally stopped crying, she turned to him. What happens now? Now we file the new evidence, we push for extradition, and we wait for the courts to do their job. And Michael? Michael's done. He just doesn't know it yet. Clara leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling the warmth of him beside her. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For believing me. When no one else did. Ethan put his arm around her. I'll always believe you. They sat like that for a long time, watching the sun set through the window, and Clara realized something had shifted between them, something that had been building since the night of the storm. She wasn't sure what to call it yet, but it felt like hope. The extradition took 6 weeks. Michael fought it every step of the way, but Eleanor's evidence made it impossible for the Cayman government to keep protecting him. By the end of March, he was on a plane back to the United States, in handcuffs, facing federal charges. Clara didn't go to see him arrested. She was at the diner, serving coffee to the morning regulars, when Patricia called with the news. It's over, Patricia said. He's in custody. Clara set down the coffee pot carefully, her hands shaking. Clara, you there? Yeah, I'm here. The appeals court ruled on your father's case this morning. They're overturning the conviction. He'll be released within the week. Clara had to sit down. The regulars at the counter looked at her, concerned, but she waved them off. Thank you, she managed. Thank you, Patricia. Thank Ethan, and thank yourself. You did this. When Clara hung up, she sat there for a long moment, trying to process what she'd just heard. Her father was coming home. Michael was going to prison. It was over. She called Ethan. He picked up immediately. Did Patricia tell you? He asked. Yeah. How do you feel? Clara laughed, and it came out shaky. I don't know. Relieved, exhausted, terrified. Terrified? What if my father doesn't want to come back here? What if he can't forgive me for bringing all of this back up? Clara, your father spent 3 years in prison for something he didn't do. Trust me, he wants to come home. Clara took a breath. Will you come with me when I pick him up? You sure you want me there? Yeah, I'm sure. There was a pause, and then Ethan said quietly, I'd be honored. The day Richard Bennett walked out of prison was bright and clear, the kind of spring day that felt like a promise. Clara stood outside the gates with Ethan beside her, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The door opened, and there was her father. He looked older, thinner, but when he saw Clara, his face broke into a smile that made him look young again. Clara Bear, he said, his voice rough. Clara ran to him, and he caught her in a hug that felt like coming home. They stood there holding each other, both crying, neither caring who saw. When they finally pulled apart, Richard looked at Ethan. You must be Ethan Cole. Ethan held out his hand. Yes, sir. Richard shook it, his grip firm despite everything. Thank you for what you did for my daughter. She did it herself, Ethan said. I just helped. Richard smiled. I doubt that, but I appreciate the humility. They drove back to the diner together, Richard in the front seat, looking out the window like he was seeing the world for the first time. I can't believe it's real, he said quietly. I kept thinking I'd wake up and still be in that cell. You're out, Dad, for good. Richard reached over and squeezed her hand. Because of you. When they pulled up to the diner, Clara's mother was waiting on the front step. The nurse had brought her down, dressed her in the blue cardigan Richard had bought her for their 30th anniversary. She didn't remember much these days, the stroke and the stress having taken most of her recent memories. But when she saw Richard, something flickered in her eyes. Richard? She said, uncertain. Hi, sweetheart, Richard said, walking toward her slowly. Where have you been? Away, but I'm home now. She smiled, and for a moment she was the woman she used to be. Good. I missed you. Richard pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. Clara stood with Ethan, watching her parents reunite, and felt something break open in her chest. You did that, Ethan said quietly. We did that, Clara corrected. Ethan took her hand and she didn't pull away. They stood there together, watching the family she'd fought so hard to save finally come back together. And Clara realized that for the first time in 3 years, she could breathe. The first week after Richard came home, Clara barely slept. She kept waking up at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, convinced it had all been a dream. That she'd walk downstairs and find the apartment empty, her father still locked away, Michael still free, everything still broken. But every morning she'd come down to find her father sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, reading the newspaper like he used to, and the relief would hit her all over again. He was really home. The diner felt different now, lighter somehow. Richard helped out where he could, greeting customers, managing inventory, things that didn't require him to be on his feet too long. 3 years in prison had taken a toll on his body that Clara tried not to think about too hard. Her mother had good days and bad days. Some mornings she'd wake up and know exactly who Richard was, would kiss him and ask what he wanted for breakfast. Other days she'd look at him like a stranger and ask the nurse when her husband was coming home. On those days, Richard would just smile and say, "Soon, sweetheart, soon." Clara didn't know how he did it. "You learn to accept what you can't change," he told her one night after her mother had gone to bed. They were sitting in the diner, the place empty and quiet. "And you hold on to the good moments when they come." Does it hurt when she doesn't remember? Richard was quiet for a long moment. Every time. But I'd rather be here for the days she does remember than not be here at all. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were rough, scarred in places she didn't remember. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it." "You have nothing to be sorry for." "I brought Michael into our lives. I vouched for him. And he fooled all of us. That's on him, not you." Richard squeezed her hand. "You saved me, Clara. Don't forget that." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I had help." "Ethan seems like a good man." "He is." "You love him." The question caught Clara off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe. I think so. It's complicated." Richard smiled. Love usually is. He was part of the reason everything fell apart. His firm pulled the funding. And then he spent months helping you put it back together. People make mistakes, Clara. What matters is what they do after. Clara thought about Ethan, about the way he'd shown up at the diner during the storm and stayed, the way he'd believed her when no one else would, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the room. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think I do love him." "Then tell him." "What if he doesn't feel the same way?" Richard laughed, and it was the first real laugh Clara had heard from him since he got out. "Clara, that man drove 3 hours in the middle of the night because you couldn't sleep. He feels the same way." But telling Ethan how she felt turned out to be harder than Clara expected. He was busy with work, traveling for meetings, dealing with a merger that had gone sideways. They talked on the phone most nights, but it wasn't the same as being in the same room. Clara missed him in ways that surprised her. Missed the way he listened when she talked, the quiet strength he carried, the fact that he never tried to fix things for her, just stood beside her while she fixed them herself. 3 weeks after her father came home, Ethan called with news. "Michael's pleading guilty," he said. Clara almost dropped the phone. "What?" "His lawyers called Patricia this morning. He's taken a deal. 20 years? No parole." "Why would he do that?" "Because Eleanor's evidence buried him. He knew if it went to trial, he'd get twice that, maybe more." Clara sat down slowly. "So it's really over?" "Yeah, it's really over." She should have felt relief, victory, but instead she just felt empty. "Clara, you there?" "I thought I'd feel different," she said. "When it was done, I thought I'd feel, I don't know, happy." "What do you feel?" Tried to find the words. "Tired. And like I don't know what to do next." "Take a breath," Ethan said gently. "You've been running on adrenaline for months. Let yourself rest." "I don't know how." "Then let me help you figure it out." Clara smiled despite everything. "When are you coming back?" "Tomorrow. I'll be there by dinner." "Okay." "Clara?" "Yeah?" "I'm proud of you. You know that, right?" Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "Yeah, I know." Ethan arrived the next evening just as Clara was closing up the diner. He walked in looking exhausted, tie loose, jacket over his arm, and Clara felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "Hey," he said. "Hey yourself." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Clara realized how much she'd missed this. Him. The way he made everything feel manageable just by being in the room. "You hungry?" she asked. "Starving." Clara made them both sandwiches, the same kind she'd made the night of the storm, and they sat at the counter eating in comfortable silence. "How's your dad adjusting?" Ethan asked. "Better than I expected. He's already talking about maybe opening a small consulting business. Nothing big, just helping small companies with real estate deals." "That's great." "Yeah, he needs something to do. Sitting around makes him restless." "What about you? What do you need?" Clara set down her sandwich. "What do you mean?" "You spent 3 years running this place. Then months fighting to clear your father's name. Now that it's done, what do you want?" No one had asked her that in a long time. "I don't know," Clara admitted. "I've been so focused on survival that I forgot to think about what comes after." Ethan turned on his stool to face her. "So think about it now. If you could do anything, be anywhere, what would you choose?" Clara looked around the diner, the worn booze, the flickering lights, the counter she'd wiped down 10,000 times. "I want to keep this place," she said, "but I want it to be more than just survival. I want to actually make it something good." "Then let's do that." "Let's?" Ethan smiled. "I've got some experience with building businesses, and I'm looking for a new project. I can't afford to pay you. I don't want your money, Clara. I want to help." Clara studied his face, looking for the catch, but there wasn't one. He just wanted to be here, with her. "Okay," she said finally. "Partners." "Partners," Ethan agreed. They shook on it, and Clara felt something shift. This wasn't charity. This wasn't guilt. This was two people choosing to build something together, and that felt like the beginning of something real. Over the next few months, they transformed the diner. Ethan brought in contractors to fix the roof, replace the freezer, update the kitchen equipment. Clara fought him on it at first, worried about the cost, but he reminded her they were partners, and partners invested in their business. She redesigned the menu, kept the classics, but added new things. Better coffee, homemade pies, breakfast specials that brought in crowds from 3 towns over. Richard helped with the business side, setting up proper accounting, negotiating with suppliers, making sure everything was above board and sustainable. And slowly, the diner stopped being a place Clara ran to hide and started being a place she was proud of. The media attention faded eventually, the way it always did. A few articles came out when Michael was sentenced, and one magazine did a feature on Clara's comeback, but mostly people moved on to the next story. Clara was grateful for that. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted her life back, and piece by piece, she was getting it. One evening in late summer, Clara was closing up when she heard the door open behind her. She turned, ready to tell whoever it was that they were closed, and stopped. Ethan was standing there holding a small boy's hand. The boy had Ethan's dark hair and serious eyes, but there was something softer in his face. He looked up at Clara with curiosity, no fear. "Hi," the boy said. "Are you Clara?" Clara's heart melted. "I am. You must be Jonah." Jonah nodded solemnly. "Daddy says you make the best grilled cheese in the whole world." Clara laughed, glancing at Ethan. "Does he now?" Ethan shrugged, smiling. "I might have mentioned it once or twice." "Can I have one?" Jonah asked hopefully. "Absolutely. Grab a seat." Clara made 3 grilled cheese sandwiches while Jonah told her about preschool, his favorite dinosaur, and the time he saw a real fire truck. Ethan sat beside his son, occasionally correcting details, but mostly just letting him talk. Watching them together made Clara's chest ache in the best way. After dinner, Jonah fell asleep in the booth, his head on Ethan's lap. "Sorry," Ethan said quietly. "He crashes hard after 8. "Don't apologize. He's sweet. He wanted to meet you. He's been asking for weeks." "I'm glad he did." Ethan looked down at his sleeping son, then back at Clara. "Can we talk?" Clara felt her heart rate pick up. "Sure." Ethan carefully slid out from under Jonah, laying him down gently on the booth cushion. Then he walked over to where Clara was standing by the counter. "I need to tell you something," he said. And I've been putting it off because I didn't want to complicate things while you were dealing with everything else. But I can't keep it in anymore. Clara's mouth went dry. Okay. I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and terrifying. I've been in love with you since the night of the storm, Ethan continued, when you stood in this diner and took care of everyone without asking for anything in return. And it's only gotten worse since then. Worse? Clara managed. Worse. Better. I don't know. But I can't stop thinking about you, and I don't want to. And I know the timing is terrible, and I know we're business partners now, and I know I was part of what destroyed your life, but... Clara kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't smooth. She just reached up, grabbed his shirt, and pulled him down to her. Ethan froze for half a second, then kissed her back, his hands coming up to cup her face. It felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. So that's a yes? He asked. Clara laughed, and it came out shaky. Yeah, that's a yes. To what? To all of it. To you loving me. To me loving you back. To whatever this is. Ethan pulled back to look at her. You love me? Apparently I'm terrible at hiding it. When did you know? Clara thought about it. Probably when you showed up at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. Or maybe when you washed dishes with me. Or when you believed me about Michael when you had no reason to. I had every reason to. You're the most honest person I've ever met. I'm also a mess. Yeah, but you're my mess. Clara hit him lightly on the chest. That was terrible. I know, I'm not good at this. Neither am I. So we'll figure it out together. Okay? They kissed again, slower this time, and Clara felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for years. This was what it was supposed to feel like, not perfect, not easy, but right. A small voice interrupted them. Are you guys kissing? They broke apart to find Jonah sitting up in the booth, rubbing his eyes. Ethan cleared his throat. Yeah, buddy. Does that mean Clara's your girlfriend now? Ethan looked at Clara, raising an eyebrow. I guess it does, Clara said. Jonah considered this seriously. That's good. I like her. Me too, buddy, Ethan said. Me too. The fall brought changes neither of them expected. Richard's health took a turn. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that he needed to slow down, step back from the diner. Clara hired additional help, 2 local women who needed work and didn't mind the early hours. Her mother had more bad days than good now. The nurse said it was normal, progressive, that they should prepare for it to get worse. Clara tried to prepare, but she didn't know how. Ethan was there through all of it, not trying to fix anything, just present. He'd sit with her mother on the days she was confused, talking to her about things that didn't matter, making her laugh. He'd help Richard with physical therapy exercises, keeping him company through the frustration. And he'd hold Clara when she broke down, which happened more often than she liked to admit. I thought once Michael was gone, everything would be okay, she told him one night. They were in her apartment, curled up on the couch. But it's not. My mom's getting worse. My dad's body is failing, and I can't fix any of it. You're not supposed to fix it, Ethan said gently. You're just supposed to be here. That doesn't feel like enough. It's everything. Jonah started calling Clara by name around October. Not Dad's girlfriend or that lady, just Clara. And sometimes, when he was tired or happy, it sounded almost like family. One Saturday, Ethan brought him to the diner for breakfast, and Jonah climbed up on a stool and announced, I want pancakes, the kind Clara makes. The kind Clara makes, Ethan repeated, amused. With the smiley face and chocolate chips. Clara smiled. Coming right up? While she cooked, she listened to Jonah tell Ethan about school, about the bully who'd pushed him but then said sorry, about the picture he'd drawn of the 3 of them. 3 of who? Ethan asked. Me and you and Clara. We're at the diner, see? That's the counter. Clara turned to look. Jonah was holding up a piece of construction paper covered in crayon. 3 stick figures, 1 small, 2 tall, standing in front of a brown rectangle. Her throat went tight. That's beautiful, buddy, Ethan said quietly. Can Clara keep it? Jonah asked. If she wants to. Clara walked over, took the picture carefully. I'd love to keep it. Thank you, Jonah. He beamed at her, and Clara felt her heart crack open just a little more. That night, after Jonah was asleep and Ethan was getting ready to leave, Clara stopped him at the door. "I want you to know something," she said. "What's that?" "I don't just love you, I love him too." Ethan's eyes softened. "He loves you too. He asks about you every day." "Is that okay? That I love your son?" "Clara, that's everything. That's all I could ever want." They kissed in the doorway, and Clara thought about the picture Jonah had drawn, the three of them together. It looked like family, and maybe it was. Winter came early that year. By November, snow was already piling up, and Clara couldn't help but think about the storm that had started everything. A year ago, almost to the day, Ethan had walked into this diner as a stranger. Now he was the person she called when she couldn't sleep, the one who knew how she took her coffee, the man whose son had started asking if Clara could come to his school play. Life was messy and complicated and nothing like Clara had planned, but it was hers. Michael's sentencing made the news one last time. 20 years in federal prison, no parole. Eleanor Torrance released a statement saying she hoped the families affected could find peace. Clara didn't watch the coverage. She was at the diner, serving coffee, living her life. She'd won, but more importantly, she'd survived. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped just surviving and started actually living again. Richard's consulting business took off slowly but steadily. He worked from home, took clients via video calls, and seemed happy in a way Clara hadn't seen in years. "I forgot what it felt like," he told her one evening, "to build something, to be useful." "You've always been useful, Dad." "I've been a burden." "Don't argue," he said when Clara started to protest. "I know what I've been, but I'm trying to be better now. You're the best father I could have asked for." Richard's eyes got misty. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything." Her mother had a good day right before Thanksgiving. She woke up clear-eyed, remembered everyone's names, and insisted on helping Clara make pies for the diner. They worked side by side in the kitchen, just like they used to when Clara was a girl, and for a few hours, everything felt normal. "I'm glad you found someone," her mother said suddenly. Clara looked up, surprised. "Ethan? He's good to you. I can see it in the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" Her mother smiled. "Like you hung the moon, like my Richard used to look at me before everything got complicated." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I love him, Mom." "I know, sweetheart. And he loves you. Don't let that go." "I won't. Promise me." "I promise." Her mother kissed her forehead, and Clara held on tight, knowing these moments were precious and fleeting. The next day, her mother forgot again. But Clara had the memory. And that was enough. Ethan proposed on a Tuesday in January. There was no grand gesture, no fancy restaurant, no elaborate plan. They were at the diner after closing, doing inventory, when he suddenly stopped counting coffee filters and turned to her. "Marry me," he said. Clara looked up from her clipboard. "What? Marry me. Not right now, not tomorrow. Whenever you're ready, but marry me." "Ethan, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together officially for a few months, but I also know I don't want to do life without you. And Jonah needs you, and I need you. So marry me." Clara set down the clipboard with shaking hands. "You're serious?" "Completely. You're proposing to me in the middle of inventory." "Yeah, bad timing?" Clara laughed, and it came out half sob. "The worst timing." "Is that a no?" "It's a yes, you idiot." Ethan's face split into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. He crossed the space between them in 2 steps and picked her up, spinning her around. "Put me down," Clara said, laughing. "Not a chance." "Ethan, say it again." "Put me down." "Not that. The other thing." Clara cupped his face in her hands. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, deep and long, and Clara felt like her heart might burst. When they finally broke apart, Ethan pulled a ring from his pocket. It was simple, elegant, not the kind of thing meant to show off. Just a single diamond on a platinum band. "It's perfect," Clara whispered. "It was my grandmother's. She left it to me years ago, told me to give it to someone who deserved it." "And you think I deserve it?" "I know you do." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been made for her. They stood there in the empty diner holding each other, and Clara thought about how far she'd come from that night a year ago when she'd been alone, struggling, hiding from a past that wouldn't let her go. Now she had a future, and it looked nothing like what she'd planned. It looked better. They told Jonah the next morning. Ethan made pancakes while Clara set the table, and they sat the 4-year-old down with all the seriousness the moment deserved. "Buddy, Clara and I have something to tell you," Ethan said. Jonah looked between them, syrup on his chin. "What? We're getting married." Jonah blinked. "What's that mean?" "It means Clara's going to be part of our family, forever." Jonah thought about this for a long moment. Then he turned to Clara. "Will you live with us?" "If that's okay with you," Clara said. "Will you make me pancakes?" "Whenever you want." "Will you be my mom?" Clara's breath caught. She looked at Ethan, who had tears in his eyes. "I can't replace your mom," Clara said carefully, "but I can love you like a mom would, if you want me to." Jonah considered this with the seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster. Then he nodded. "Okay, but you have to read me stories at bedtime." "Deal." Jonah went back to his pancakes like they hadn't just rearranged his entire world. Ethan reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She was more than okay. She was home. They got married in May, in the diner, with just family and a few close friends. Richard walked Clara down the aisle between the booths, his hand steady on her arm despite the cane he needed now. Her mother sat in the front, clear-eyed and present, wearing the dress Clara had picked out for her. Jonah stood beside Ethan as best man, holding the rings in a small box and taking his job very seriously. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Jonah raised his hand. Everyone froze. "Jonah?" Ethan said carefully. "What's wrong, buddy?" "I forgot to tell Clara something." "What did you forget?" Jonah turned to Clara, serious as could be. "I love you." Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I love you too." "Okay, you can get married now." The entire room laughed, and Clara saw Ethan wipe his own eyes. They said their vows, simple words about choosing each other, about building something together, about family and future and second chances. When the officiant pronounced them married, Jonah cheered louder than anyone. The reception was small, just dinner at the diner, the same food Clara had been serving for years. But it tasted better somehow, surrounded by people she loved. Richard gave a toast that made everyone cry. He talked about losing everything and finding out what actually mattered, about his daughter's strength, about the man who'd helped her fight, about the second chances they'd all been given. "Life isn't about the money you make or the empire you build," Richard said, looking at Clara and Ethan. "It's about the people you love and the family you create. And I'm grateful that even in my darkest moment, I never lost sight of that." He raised his glass. "To Clara and Ethan, may you build something beautiful together." Everyone drank, and Clara felt her father's words settle into her bones. This was what mattered, not the money Michael had stolen, not the years she'd lost, not the scandal or the shame or the pain. This, the people in this room, the love that had survived everything, the family she'd fought so hard to save, and the new family she'd found along the way. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the diner was quiet, Clara and Ethan stood in the kitchen washing dishes together. It reminded Clara of that first night when Ethan had surprised her by helping without being asked. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, passing her a plate to dry. "That I'm glad you got stuck in that storm." Ethan smiled. "Me too." "You think we would have met anyway, if not for the snow?" "I don't know, maybe, but I'm glad we don't have to find out." Clara set down the dish towel and turned to face him. "I need you to know something." "What's that?" "I don't need you. The diner's doing well. My father's home. I could do this alone if I had to." Ethan's smile faded slightly. "Okay. But I don't want to. I choose you, Ethan, not because I need rescuing or because you can fix my problems, but because you make everything better just by being in it." Ethan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "That's all I ever wanted to be, just someone who makes your life better." "You're so much more than that." "Yeah?" "Yeah. You're my family. You and Jonah. You're everything." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and Clara thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, alone, scared, hiding from the world. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd fought for everything she had, who'd survived betrayal and loss and rebuilt her life from nothing. A woman who'd learned that strength wasn't about being perfect or fearless or unbreakable. It was about getting up every time you fell down, about asking for help when you needed it, about loving people even when it was scary. Clara had lost everything once, but she'd gained something better. She'd gained herself, and she'd gained a family worth fighting for. 6 months later, Clara got a letter. It came to the diner, addressed in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it carefully, half expecting another threat from Michael. But it wasn't from Michael. It was from Eleanor Torrance. Dear Clara, I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what my son did, but I wanted you to know that I've established a foundation in your family's name. The Bennett Foundation will provide legal aid and financial support to families affected by fraud and white-collar crime. It won't undo what Michael did. Nothing can. But perhaps it can help others who find themselves in the situation your family faced. You showed incredible courage in fighting back when most people would have given up. I hope you know how much that matters. The foundation is yours if you want it. If not, I'll ensure it continues in your name regardless. With deepest respect and regret, Eleanor Torrance. Clara read the letter twice, then showed it to Ethan. What do you think? She asked. Ethan read it carefully. What do you want to do? I think I want to say yes. Not because I forgive Michael, but because maybe something good can come from all of this. Then let's make it happen. The Bennett Foundation launched that fall with Clara as the advisory board chair. She didn't quit the diner, would never quit the diner, but she carved out time to help other families navigate the nightmare she'd lived through. It felt like closing a circle. Richard helped when his health allowed, providing advice and support. He seemed energized by the work, like he'd finally found a way to make meaning from everything they'd lost. Clara's mother had fewer good days now, but the ones she had were treasured. She'd hold Clara's hand and tell her she was proud, and Clara would hold on tight and thank her for everything. Jonah started kindergarten and told everyone his mom ran a diner and helped people. When his teacher asked if he meant his dad's wife, he looked at her like she was crazy. Clara's my mom, he said simply. She's always been my mom. And Clara's heart grew 3 sizes. One evening in late November, almost 2 years after the storm, Clara locked up the diner and found Ethan waiting outside with Jonah. What are you two doing here? She asked. We have a surprise, Jonah said, bouncing with excitement. What kind of surprise? Ethan took her hand. Come on. They walked to the parking lot, where a car Clara didn't recognize was parked under the streetlight. What's this? Clara asked. Open the trunk, Ethan said. Clara opened it and found it full of boxes, decorations, lights, a small artificial tree. What? It's almost Christmas, Jonah explained. And you said you haven't had a real Christmas in forever, so we're making one. Clara looked at Ethan, who shrugged. Kid's idea, I just bought the supplies. They spent the next 2 hours transforming the diner, stringing lights along the windows, setting up the tree in the corner, hanging ornaments that Jonah had made in school. By the time they finished, the place looked magical. Clara stood in the middle of it all, looking at the lights and the decorations and the family she'd somehow built, and felt tears slip down her cheeks. You okay? Ethan asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Yeah, Clara whispered. I'm perfect. Liar. She laughed. Okay, not perfect, but happy. Really, truly happy. Good, you deserve it. Jonah ran over and hugged them both. Can we have hot chocolate now? Absolutely, Clara said. They made hot chocolate in the diner kitchen, piled extra marshmallows in Jonah's cup, and sat together in a booth watching the lights twinkle. This was her life now, not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd lost, something better, something real. And as Clara sat there between her husband and her son, in the diner she'd fought so hard to keep, she realized she wouldn't change a single thing, not the storm that brought them together, not the struggle that made her stronger, not even the pain that taught her what actually mattered, because all of it had led her here, to this moment, to this family, to this life she'd built from the broken pieces of everything she'd lost. Clara Bennett had started with nothing, and she'd ended up with everything that mattered. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and quiet, blanketing the world in white. Inside the diner, the lights glowed warm, and Clara smiled, holding tight to the people she loved, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The storm had passed, and the sun was finally shining through.